Welcome to the Understanding the AWS Security Model webinar. My name is Max Rams and I'll be your presenter today. We have with us Paul Stamp, who is a Senior Security Marketing Specialist at AWS, and Paul will be our question and answer moderator. A little background about myself. I've been with AWS 5 years now, and my prior 20 years was mostly in the Northern Virginia area, serving as a specialist with various government agencies and defense contractors. Before we begin, I would like to walk the audience through a few items. On your screen, you can see a question and answer panel. Please submit your questions at any time during this webinar. Paul will answer as many as time allows in the question and answer panel while I am presenting. Towards the end of the webinar, we may have time for a live Q&A session, and I'll address some questions as well. Lastly, this webinar is being recorded. We will share the recording and the presentation slides via email a few days after the webinar. So, one important thing to understand about security at AWS is security is truly job zero. Everyone understands that they own security. It's their responsibility. But security in AWS is not as strange as some people may think. It actually starts for us with a very familiar security model that all starts with our data centers, policies, and procedures. We build up through network security and system security just like everyone else. What we do a little differently than other people is we start with what is normal behavior in our environments, and then we look for the abnormal. And we flag on anything we find that is abnormal. We take our approach and we build up a very large series of controls around that to make sure that we understand how we secure our environment and we can prove it. And we prove it through various means that we'll talk about later in this presentation. It's been validated and driven by customer security experts and auditors from around the world. And the neatest thing about our approach is that whether you're the largest enterprise customer or the smallest startup, or just someone sitting in your dorm room using AWS to help with your classwork, you get the benefit of all the same levels of controls. For instance, Vodafone needed to deploy a new mobile payment application to help their customers top up their SIM cards every month. When they did this, they looked at their options, and PCI DSS Level 1 compliance was essential for this. They were able to launch their application in 3 months while reducing their CapEx expenditure by 30%. For them, AWS was the clear choice in terms of security and PCI DSS Level 1 compliance, even over and above data centers and co-locations. So in this webinar, we're going to talk about a few things. We'll talk about culture and innovation at AWS. We'll talk about our shared security model, discuss compliance in AWS, and talk about a few more tools and features and where to get help. So AWS has over 1 million customers running every imaginable use case you can imagine from every country. And all of them bring their own unique security requirements. So we have large enterprise customers like NASDAQ, CDC, and Shell, and others, and we have some of the smallest or newest startups. And they bring workloads from every compliance regime you can consider. And they also bring their own auditors. What that means is that we have auditors and security personnel from companies of every size and every country that's looking at what we do and their own requirements and trying to understand how to implement secure or compliant systems in AWS. We work with them to help understand how to translate their controls into our environment. And sometimes through that conversation, we find that there are things that we could do to help them. And when we find something that we can do to help them, whether that's a new service or feature, we can't operate at our scale and implement a one-off. So what we do is implement that feature in a way that everyone gets to benefit. So when you look back over our pace of innovation, what you'll see is last year, in 2014, we had over 514 actual feature releases throughout the platform. and about a third of those were related to security, compliance, governance, or audit. So what you have in AWS is a constantly innovating, secure baseline that is constantly coming up with new features that you get to enjoy, and you can choose to incorporate into your own security controls. One example of that is actually our AWS CloudTrail service. And what we found was customers needed a way to help better track what API calls were being made on behalf of that customer. And so we came up with a way to capture those log files in a very scalable manner and put it in a place where our customers could then analyze it and look for changes. What ended up happening is customers said they would like a better way to look for those changes and see how things were over time. And by working with a large number of customers, what we came up with was a service called AWS Config. This helps answer a few things. For one, you can look at any given thing. In this example would be a security group. And you could see who changed the security group authorizations over time and where did they do it from. That gives you a very powerful way to troubleshoot any incidents and figure out what happened, who changed something. But you can also use AWS Config in a more proactive manner. So you can actually look at something you're about to change, see what's dependent on that, and then decide whether or not you actually want to make this change before it breaks anything. For example, if you want to change a security group authorization, like perhaps take away an existing authorization, you could look and see what servers or EC2 instances are actually associated with that security group and determine if that change would actually impact any applications that are using it. So the best way to think about security in AWS is that you can't deploy secure applications by yourself because you have to rely on AWS and the way we operate our services. And we can't secure things for you because we don't actually have access into your running EC2 instances. So it takes both of us working together in order for you to have a secure application environment. AWS takes care of everything from the physical footprint of our data centers up through our use of administrative privilege into the way that we actually design, build, and operate our services. You then have responsibility for how you manage identity and how you manage privilege within AWS and your resources, where you store your data, how you choose to do things like take advantage of encryption, what services you use, how you build your applications, and what content you store. We call our side of that shared responsibility model security of the cloud. And you'll see various presentations like those from our Chief Information Security Officer, Steve Schmidt, on our YouTube channel, where we actually talk about things like security of the cloud. While you are responsible for security in the cloud, those are all the decisions that you make, which controls you choose to implement, how you choose to use those different features. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. So what this means, you get to benefit from an environment built for the most security sensitive organizations. And we actually manage more than 1,800 security controls in the way that we operate our environment, so you don't have to. You get to define the right security controls for your workload. You may have, for example, a PCI application that requires a very high bar for security, or you may have the latest Facebook game. Either way, you get to choose exactly what controls are there, what services are used, and how they're configured. But the bottom line here is you always have full ownership and control of your data. What you place in AWS belongs to you. By working with so many customers across so many industries, we're able to take a look at how can we really help our customers better. What you'll find is that across those 1,852 security controls, we run a very large certification and accreditation program and assurance programs. This covers the wide range of things, but we'll walk through these quickly. Our core audits are our SOC 1, SOC 2 security and availability, and SOC 3. This actually is available to all of our customers under NDA, so you get the full non-redacted report. You get to see exactly what our auditors say. We also run ISO 27001 and ISO 9001 because we understand that some of our customers value the ISO 27001 framework. We are an accredited PCI DSS Level 1 service provider, and we have many customers running PCI workloads on AWS. We also have customers that run HIPAA workloads. So if you have a requirement for managing healthcare in the United States, you can actually sign a business associate agreement with AWS and be fully compliant. In fact, we have more information about these and all of our other programs on our AWS Compliance Center, which is found at aws.amazon.com/compliance. We make these reports available to all of our customers under NDA, so you get to see exactly what our auditors say. And I encourage you to take advantage of that. The important thing to understand is just because you're running an application like a PCI application on AWS doesn't mean you're automatically covered with PCI. You still have your half of the shared responsibility model that you have to do. But also know that you have people in AWS that will work with you to help make sure your auditors understand what it means to run in that particular compliance regime on AWS. And we encourage you to reach out and talk to your account manager and a solution architect or security solution architect to better understand this. One example of this that we recently announced is the IT Grundschutz certification workbook. This was an assessment done by TÜV Trust IT, where they took a look at the German requirements for data privacy and protection and looked at the AWS controls and found that customers are able to run compliant with IT Grundschutz in AWS. We took a slightly different approach with this one in that we made available a workbook so that our customers can freely download this compliance workbook and understand exactly how to layer their own controls on top of ours within our environment. And we encourage customers to take a look at this and other requirements. Again, reach out to your account manager to better understand this. One thing that I found working with customers on AWS and across my own experience is that there's a large difference between compliance and accreditation on-premise data centers and on AWS. In on-premise environments, you start with a bare concrete and you're responsible for everything from the concrete up through your application stack. And what most people do, I know I did this, is you actually create an environment specifically for that particular workload, and you coordinate it off from the rest of the environments. So you typically have your PCI application separate from your general infrastructure. Audits are done by either an in-house team, sometimes by third-party experts, and generally speaking, you're accountable to yourself or your executives and board. These audits are typically done once a year, and they are very tailored for that workload and compliance regime. On AWS, you start with a base of accredited and audited services. And because we have to operate at scale, we define all the requirements necessary to meet all of our compliance regimes, and then we operate all of our services within the scopes of those audits at that high watermark. We do in-house audits, of course, but we also bring in third-party experts. And because we make those reports available to our customers, we're accountable to everyone. So what ends up happening is we take an approach of continuous monitoring, and we have customers that take advantage of all those security controls in any workload they choose to use. And because we actually have so many customers running so many different kinds of workloads, we end up having a constant pace of innovation. As you saw It's roughly about a third of our releases every year are somehow related to security compliance. So we're going to go into a few more tools and a few more features here. One thing to understand is it's not just AWS and our services and features that you can leverage. We also have a rich partner ecosystem, and together we have over 700 security services, tools, and features available both directly from AWS, from our partners within the marketplace, and from our partners directly. And you have the ability to mirror all the familiar controls you're looking for from your on-prem environments in AWS. One of the foundational controls here is how you manage your EC2 instances. So you're fully in charge. There are no backdoors that AWS has to be able to log into your servers. You get to define exactly which OS you're going to pick. We offer our own version of Amazon Linux, but you can choose to use Red Hat, SUSE, or anything from Ubuntu to FreeBSD if you'd like. You can also run Windows operating systems. We also have customers that take those general offerings and then customize them to themselves. Or they'll turn to our partners to use any of their pre-configured offerings. Like for example, Buddha Labs offers a DoD compliant secure baseline version of Windows and other operating systems. When you customize one of these, you can choose to bake it all into your own custom AMI where you can configure everything to be exactly how you want it to be. You can preload things like host intrusion detection agents or patching and antivirus agents or anything you choose to have in your OSs and make this private to you so that only your account has access to it. In fact, you can customize it so that only a subset of your users have access to it by taking advantage of our tags for EC2. You also have the ability to have very fine-grained controls of how you manage users. You could choose to have OS users and have your AMIs taking advantage of LDAP or Windows Active Directory so that you can have appropriate separation of duties and least privilege going on inside your operating systems. And you can build out your standard security environment taking advantage of features within your AWS account and resources, or you can connect to your existing on-premise resources. So the choice really is yours. Now, one of the neat things about this is because AWS is fundamentally software-defined infrastructure, you have the option of describing all this through JSON files, taking advantage of CloudFormation to define an application is these following AMIs running with these load balancers across these subnets in this VPC, and define all the other characteristics that CloudFormation supports and have that in a single file. You could then launch that so that it all comes up correctly or it all rolls back so that you know that what you get is what you wanted. We actually have quite a few customers that do that and then focus on optimizing the CloudFormation definitions and their AMIs, or perhaps they're using something like Chef or Puppet to actually configure their EC2 instances. So they focus their energy on the definition of how things should be and then do their testing once things are launched to validate that they have their own continuous monitoring programs in place to make sure everything looks correct. Once customers figure out that virtual private clouds carve off a piece of AWS and make it private to them, and there's no cost for defining a virtual private cloud, only for the IPsec connections or the direct connect connections that we'll talk about soon, then they start coming up with some interesting ways to use virtual private cloud. Many of them will do things like isolate off higher risk sites like perhaps internet facing websites or digital presences into their own VPC and maybe have another VPC for their internal enterprise applications. Some of them may create VPCs specific for dev and test environments or specific for things like data analytics, while others will create VPCs for project teams, especially if they've outsourced the project development work. That way they can outsource the infrastructure and have it supporting their outsourced contractors, but still maintain control over it so that they can have their own security controls enforced over it. And when the contract's done, they retain ownership of the infrastructure. So customers are coming up with very creative ways to take advantage of virtual private clouds in ways that no one has been able to do before with regular data centers because of the flexibility it offers. So encryption is a foundational control. It's not the panacea for everything, but it's something that we encourage you to take advantage of whenever you can. Many of our services have native support for encryption. For example, in EBS, our Elastic Block Store, you can create encrypted volumes. You've always been able to do it yourself just by using OS level controls because EBS is presented to your servers as SCSI block devices. So you could create encrypted partitions or just use encrypted files within that. But now we actually have the ability to just do checkbox encryption to create encrypted volumes for you to use as data volumes. We also have partners like Trend Micro and SafeNet and others that have the ability to do this for you. Amazon S3 has long offered the ability to do client-side encryption, and for a long time has also supported server-side encryption. With our release of the new key management service, it now has the ability for you to manage the key that's used for server-side encryption so that you have full visibility of whenever the key is requested and audited. Redshift itself has one-click support for encryption whether you're using Cloud HSM or KMS so that you can very easily support encrypted volumes for Redshift. And of course, Amazon RDS supports encryption. In MySQL or Postgres, we have automated support for the entire database instance using KMS services and keys. Or in Microsoft SQL Server and Oracle, we support TDE, or Transparent Data Encryption, and your ability to store the keys in Cloud HSM. So we encourage you to take advantage of encryption for data at rest, as you'll find that the majority of the places where we support encryption, we actually do not charge anything extra for it. Identity and access management is another key control. So you get to control who can do what from your environment, when, and from where. For example, you can create a group or a role that says your system administrators can only launch EC2 instances if they're coming from the IP range that represents your offices or data centers, Monday through Friday from 8 to 5 p.m. So you can get very granular on what are the requirements in order to allow people to use their privilege. You can also take advantage of multi-factor authentication for those particularly sensitive calls, something perhaps like deleting backups, for example. You may want to put an MFA requirement on, so you have that second factor. You can also choose to integrate with your existing corporate directory using SAML 2.0. So instead of having to recreate IAM users and groups within AWS, you can just use the SAML 2.0 integration and take advantage of your predefined Active Directory groups. That way your administrators do not have to remember multiple sets of credentials. One of the big things that's also different between security in data centers and security in AWS is you have lots of visibility going on. Most of our services have some ability to generate log files, and we encourage you to take advantage of those. One of the most important services that's come out is CloudTrail. CloudTrail will actually let you record the API calls for the supported environments and save those in S3 buckets. That way you get to see who did what and when from where. The list of services is always growing, but right now it supports most of the core services. And you can easily aggregate all the log information, even from multiple accounts, into a single S3 bucket. One of the recent releases we also did was integrating CloudTrail with CloudWatch logs. That gives you the ability to create simple alerts on your CloudTrail stream. So for example, you could create an alert for whenever you see someone get a denied request on something. We also work very closely with our partners like Splunk, AlertLogic, and Sumo Logic so that they can automatically integrate with these features and offer an even richer offering to our customers. Speaking of our partners, we encourage you to take a look at AWS Marketplace, where we have many partners across many different features and categories. But if we just look at our security ones, here are some of the more notable ones. So we have everything from advanced threat analytics by AlertLogic and AlienVault, all the way through things like server and endpoint protection with Trend Micro and Intel Security. And many customers are asking whether or not they can do security penetration testing on AWS. And we actually have 2 partners here that have a pre-authorized ability for you to just launch a test environment and then test your environment in AWS. That's from Tenable and Qualys. Now, of course, if you want to do the testing yourself or use someone else to do your testing, that's completely supported as well. Just go to aws.amazon.com/security, and from there you'll actually see on the left-hand side a link for you to actually register your security test. You'll get an authorization code within just a few days, and you'll be able to do the testing as you desire. And remember, we feel it's important to help our customers in every way possible. So we've created an automated tool called Trusted Advisor that lets you do lots of different configuration checks of your account. Some of the most important ones are among the security column, at least from my opinion as a security professional, of course. Those are things like open ports in your security groups, or unrestricted access, or places where you haven't turned CloudTrail logging on. And it's important to remember that you have to turn CloudTrail logging on within each region. And we encourage you to turn the CloudTrail logging on in all the regions that your account has access to, even the ones you're not using right now. That way you are sure to know exactly what's going on in your account. Trusted Advisor also has many other benefits, including some automated checks to help reduce your costs. For example, it will look at EC2 instances that seem like they're being underutilized. Because we can't see inside your running servers, we don't actually know what it's doing, but we can see things like the CPU is being underutilized, like perhaps less than 5%, and it'll report that to you as a potential cost savings. There is a free tier in Trusted Advisor, but if you want to unlock all the checks, then when you sign up for business support, you'll automatically get those too. And we encourage you to look at those regularly. Speaking of support, there's lots of different places for you to get that. It's everything from your account team, which, yes, there are actually people behind the APIs to help you. If you go to the management console or the web pages, you'll find a link to contact your account manager. And that account manager will help you to better understand how to use AWS services and can get you in touch with solution architects that can help you review your designs and make sure you're taking advantage of the services in the best way possible. We also have a professional support organization, and there's 4 tiers of support available. There's a free tier that everyone gets, which is the basic support for the AWS services. And it has access to the forums and health checks and other things that we've discussed. There's also developer support, which gives you additional email support and access to best practice guidance. Business support, which gives you phone chat and email support with a 1-hour SLA. And enterprise support, which brings that down to 15 minutes response time and assigns a dedicated technical account manager to you. Now, when we talk to customers, we often encourage them to reach out to their account team so that they can get an architectural review of what they intend to do on AWS so that they're making sure that they're leveraging all the services in the optimal way. And whenever you're about to go live with a production workload, we encourage you to sign up for business support. That way you get access to our global support organization. Enterprise support is something that's appropriate for some of our largest customers. And it's something that if you feel that you need a dedicated technical account manager, you should truly explore. We also have a professional services organization. So if you would like some dedicated AWS professionals to help you, then you can get support for creating your enterprise security architecture, or doing everything from policy and controls mapping, or designing your systems, your security center. It's not just from AWS professionals though. They also have a rich partner network that they can reach out to ensure that we get the right set of resources to help you for whatever you're trying to do. We encourage you to reach out whenever you feel you need some dedicated help here. So in summary, security is job zero for AWS. We take care of security of the cloud and all those controls that we've talked about earlier to make sure that we're running our services in the most secure and optimal way possible. You get the freedom to define the controls you want to have operating in the cloud so that it is the most effective set of solutions to make sure that you get all your security controls met for your objectives. Compliance can be more cost effective in AWS because we automatically take care of most of the physical controls and a lot of the things that are embedded just within our services. And again, reach out to see those compliance reports whenever you need them. Of course, you can take advantage of over 700 services, tools, and features from AWS and our partners and configure them to be exactly how you want them to be. And we have people here to help, both within AWS and our partner ecosystem. So we encourage you to reach out.